Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Malicious Compliance. Story 1. It was DrSeuss week and the teachers wanted to watch Cat in the Hat with Mike Myers. Just a small story and nothing too big. But I wanted to share this after watching the Cat in the Hat movie with my husband. I used to work for a Head Start program and it was DrSeuss week. Surprisingly, the full-day class teachers never seen the movie and wanted to put it on. I told them they shouldn't because there is a lot of adult jokes in it. They told me it was a kids' movie and didn't know what I was talking about. I made sure to put on the subtitles so the teachers and parents can read it if they didn't heard it. Let's just say all the parents took their kids and went straight to the director's office. We end up getting write-ups. I tried to fight for mine, but the director said I could have alerted them on the matter. Fair enough. Thank you for reading this. It is one of my favorite stories to tell. Edit. First, when I meant them I meant the director. Second, my grammar isn't perfect and I have to deal with speech issues for the rest of my life. Brain damage isn't fun. Story 2. You want me to leave you alone? Okay, enjoy handling the bus by yourself. Hello ladies, gentlemen, and other fellow readers. I've listened to other MC stories but never thought I'd ever have one to tell until today. I work at Wendy's. Normally in back drive-through. We had a bus come through, and if you ever worked fast food you know bus equals all hands on deck. I walked up to my manager, who tends to be a B, and asked what she wanted me to do. She told me, "OP, just leave me alone." So I did. I walked back to my corner and watched as the chaos ensued. Every now and then I'd hear her ask for things to be dropped, but I did not move from my corner because I was told to leave her alone. If I'd been asked I would have done things for her, but she never asked and I was told to leave her alone, so I just stayed put and watched her struggle. Story 3. Brad and the Table. This story was told to me by my friend Lucy. At the time, she lived in an army town and worked for many summers at a restaurant popular with the officers and their families. At this particular restaurant, which is on the higher end, there's a table reserved for high-ranking officers who visit the base. People who worked there referred to it as the table. On busier nights when there isn't a higher-ranking officer in town, it's utilized to seat more patrons, but for the most part, it's left alone. It's Friday, so it's busy. There is a general visiting the base, so the table isn't being used just in case he decided to grace the establishment with his presence. Lucy is manning her section when the owner, named John for the purposes of this story, waves her down. She heads over and he tells her, "I need you and Annie, another server, to help me man the table." "The general is coming?" she asked. "Nope. Brad is." Lucy rolled her eyes. Brad was a local bigwig's high school-aged son, and he had it in his mind that he was a hot shot. He frequented the restaurant with his girl of the week and proceeded to make a nuisance of himself every time, but not enough to the point that he was asked to leave. Lucy asked John, "Are you sure? What if the general wants to eat dinner with us?" At this, John leaned in with a wide smile and said, "Apparently the general called and told us to give Brad the table and to give him and his guests anything he wanted." Lucy then smiled as she realized what was about to happen. Brad was about to get a serving of malicious compliance on the house. 20 minutes later, Brad, wearing a West Point blazer, arrives with several young people. John makes a big show of greeting them and escorting them to the table. The people look around, impressed, and Brad proceeds to command Lucy, John, and Annie around like he owns the restaurant. The only good thing about this particular experience was that, due to him being underage, Brad and his buddies never tried to order any alcohol. Brad proceeded to be a nuisance, demanding more appetizers, sending food back because it wasn't cooked just right, ordering the most expensive entrees on the menu, yada, yada, yada. Lucy, Annie, and John continue with this, smiling as more and more food is added to the table. It's time for the check. Lucy told me that the entire group managed to rack up $843.29, not counting the mandatory gratuity because the party is above a certain size. Brad gets the bill. And he flips out. What is this? He barked, waving the check. It's your check. John said. The general said to let you order anything you wanted. Brad stands up to argue, and that's when the host rushes up, her face white. John, the general is here. She whispered. Everyone turns to look and there's the general with his entourage. John excuses himself before going over. He and the general start to talk for a few minutes, and Lucy notices Brad turning white and starting to get out of his seat. Annie looked at him and said, "You better not try a dine and dash." She said. "I really don't want to have to sick these nice officers on you." Brad sat down and fidgeted. John and the general come back to the table. Making eye contact with Brad, John said, "Brad, you said the good general here insisted you have the table and that you can order anything you want. Is this true?" He only nodded. "Well, the general here said that he never made no such phone call." "That's odd," Brad said before looking at the general. "I'm pretty sure it was you I talked to." Sir. I have the phone number. Let's call it." John said, pulling out his cell phone and dialing a number. That's when they hear Brad's brand new cell phone going off in his pocket. The general held his hand out and Brad puts the phone in his hand. He checks the number and asks John, "Is your number 123-456-7890? "It is," John said. The general then proceeded to get a serious look on his face. "Brad, are you a cadet?" "I'm being considered for an appointment," Brad said. The general nodded. "I suggest you pay your bill, tip in full and apologize to the staff for your behavior," he said to Brad. "I also suggest withdrawing your name as soon as possible to save yourself the embarrassment." Keeping his head down, Brad paid the bill, meekly apologized and left with his sycophants. The general and his entourage patiently waited for the table to be cleared and set. They proceeded to have a nice meal, leaving a generous tip and apologizing for people like Brad. Lucy proceeded to have a wonderful Brad-free career. Story 4. Cutting back on overtime in a field where urgent response is the norm, you'll pay for it. I work in a field where urgent response is the entire purpose. My employer became suddenly budget conscious, which led to them becoming much more stringent about our frequent overtime. We were told that all scheduled overtime had to be approved, no issue there. However, when it came to unscheduled overtime, which is where the bulk of overtime came from, the problem arose. Any unscheduled overtime would be reviewed after the fact. If it was determined that overtime wasn't justified, we could either be faced being forced to take comp time within the same pay period so that the extra time would be negated, or they would attempt to not pay or claw back money, which is illegal. Cue malicious compliance in 2 ways. I tend to work earlier hours than our main office, so it's not uncommon for me to get phone calls once I've returned home. Normally not a big deal. I handle the call and go about my day. Most times, because it's only a few minutes, I don't even request the overtime pay. This all changed once the policy went into effect. The very first day under the new rules, I received a call from our main office about 10 minutes after I got home. I answered the phone by stating, "Hello, my work day ended 10 minutes ago, would you like for me to continue this call on overtime, or can this be dealt with to tomorrow?" The response was, "No overtime, this will only take a minute." I ultimately ended the call and dealt with the issue the following day. This occurred about a half dozen times over the span of a few days. I really made my point on this one. I received a phone call after hours that I was needed for an urgent, not emergent, I wouldn't have jeopardized anything to make a point, response. I listened to the details of what was occurring, and informed my supervisor that I'd be happy to get on the road just as soon as they'd send me an email stating that an after-hours response was required, and overtime for the night was authorized. Nothing crazy, just a sentence or two. The response I got was, "Just get on the road, I'll send you an email later or tomorrow." But I refused. I informed them that I was off duty, and they could either send me the email as requested so I'd be covered, Or they could have someone from outside my territory respond in my place, which would have delayed the response over an hour. This back and forth continued for about 3 to 4 minutes until they relented, and sent me an email, which I received in about 30 seconds, before I'd even had a chance to use the restroom or grab my keys. My points, along with my co-workers who took similar actions, were made. Our leadership only pressed forward with requiring approval for pre-scheduled overtime, and even that has gone by the wayside. Story 5. Ignore my help. Okay, there's your failed exam. When I was in 9th grade my grades weren't the best, but I managed to stay afloat thanks to my father, who majored in physics and is amazing in math. At the moment I was going through a rough patch emotionally, so that also affected my grades. Most of my friends at the moment were students that had straight A's and had stuck-up personalities when it came to their studies. I knew I was not seen as the brightest student, but I used to be a straight A student too. I knew I had the potential. Mr. Jones, our math teacher, gave us an exam to take home twice a semester. Our grades group chat was always filled with messages when this happened, filled with students asking for answers, photos, doubts, and more. Meanwhile, my friends' group chat undermined the work other students made that didn't have the best grades did. They usually just asked between themselves or other students like them for answers. This would usually get to me. It made me feel like I wasn't enough for them because of the grades I was getting. Somehow, probably fatherly instinct, my dad caught up to something and stepped up. He told me, "You're brilliant, OP, so let's get to work on this exam because I know you can get an A." This was enough for me to push through. We had a total of 4 home exams that school year. By April I had gotten an A on 3 of the 4 exams and kept it to myself. When my friends asked I just said that I had a good grade, hiding my exams from them. The last week of April we had a fight with Mr. Jones and he announced that tomorrow we would have our final home exam and this time it would be more difficult than before. He gave us the exam at the end of the class. That exam was like nothing we had ever seen, and after looking through our algebra books, it was from sections forward and had some parts that we couldn't even understand completely. When I got home I ran to my dad's room and explained the issue to him, and we decided to work on it the whole evening. By 9 o'clock we managed to answer the whole exam, proofread it, made the equations all over again to make sure we got it all right and finished. On the other hand, my classmates were up till 1 or 2 in the morning trying to solve one pesky little equation that proved to be the hardest one. My dad and I noticed that you needed to learn a process 2 sections before to answer that equation, and without it you would get the whole process wrong. The next day I got to school and saw how each one of my classmates arrived and asked others for help with the equation. In multiple occasions I offered my help, and when they asked me my final result I answered. They looked at me weirdly, then looked at their paper, and said they would ask others. 10 minutes before the bell rang, one of my friends, Paula, arrived in a frantic manner, asking everyone what result they got. Everyone except me. I managed to get close to her and observed her home exam. My eyes opened immediately and I almost felt my mouth go wide open, but I stopped myself. She had almost every equation and exercise completely wrong. I felt so bad that I got my exam out of my backpack and went to her, hoping to help her and explain to her where she went wrong. "Hey Paula? Do you need help? I've got my exam here if you'd like to compare." Her eyes almost rolled back, but instead choosing to breathe in and let out a tired breath, taking my exam into her hands. She scanned my paper, smiling faintly and trying not to laugh, giving me my exam back without finishing it. "Thanks again, but I don't need it. I'll be asking one of the more applied students for their answers." "Are you sure?" I asked, trying to insist and make her understand. "I did these with my dad and checked. I said I don't need your help, OP." She backfired at me. "I don't want your help. Check your answers because I can guarantee you that those are not correct." And she went away. I have to admit, at that moment I felt awful. My eyes got clouded with tears, almost crying. I knew my job was well done. I sucked up my tears and kept quiet. She didn't want my help? Malicious compliance. Right when the bell sounded, a student was sent to our classroom to pick up our home exams. Paula asked me in front of our friend group if I had changed my exam. I responded with a quick nope. She opened her eyes and laughed a bit. You know you're going to fail, right? Those answers made no sense. She said out loud, waiting to get a reaction out of me. I'm just worried for you. Well, I made my exam yesterday with my dad and we made sure to get every equation right. I'm sure of my answers. I said back to her. The conversation ended there, but everyone in our friend group thought the same thing as Paula, that I was going to fail. By math class, everyone was nervous to see their exam grade. 10 minutes before the bell rang, Mr. Jones got our exams out of his bag and started calling each student by their last and first name. Paula was one of the firsts to be called. When she got up and received her exam, she tried asking Mr. Jones something, but he quickly shut her down. We were seated a bit far away from each other, so I didn't know her grade right away. A few minutes later I was called and went to our teacher's desk. I extended my hand towards Mr. Jones and looked at my grade, 100%, A+. I couldn't hide the smile, and looked at Mr. Jones, who said in a lower voice to me, you did well, the only one who got perfect. Go sit down. I immediately went back to my desk, still with a smile on my face. My eyes connected with Paula's, who looked at me like she had a question mark for a face. Her face turned from strangeness to uncertainty and, finally, to the biggest I fucked up face I've ever seen. I sat down, showing others my grade. While explaining an equation to one of the students near me, I heard someone making a weird noise with their throat, demanding attention, Paula. She was standing in front of my desk, her exam in hand. What grade did you get? She asked coldly. An A. Why? I asked innocently, ignoring how she was practically spitting fumes out of her nose. Can I see your exam? She asked, already making her way to my side and taking my exam into her hands before I could even answer. Yeah, go ahead. I answered in a calm and cheery voice. While she compared her answers to mine, I saw the most beautiful array of emotions go through Paula's eyes. Rage, confusion, frustration, envy, and so much more. She was having an internal mental breakdown. Paula just got up and went back to her desk, almost crying about her grade and, in her own way, admiring defeat. She had ignored my help, and she knew that was the only reason why she failed. Also, I later learned she got a D, which gave her a B instead of an A. That was more than enough for me. TLDR, one of my friends implied I was not intelligent enough to share my math answers with her, refused my help and failed an exam. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.